Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Blue Corner. I'm Mike, as always, one half of Long Island's first MMA podcast, The Unknown Experts. So let's get to some news right off the bat. Let's see. We got OSP versus Dominic Reyes. Ovince St. Preux versus Dominic Reyes. Set for UFC 229 in Vegas. The undercard of McGregor versus Habib. UFC 225 anniversary show in Denver. We already knew that Frankie Edgar versus the Korean Zombie was on tap, as well as Cowboy Cerrone versus Platinum Mike Perry. But the newest addition is the inaugural featherweight queen, Germaine de Randamie, who vacated the belt in fear of Cyborg, calling her a quote cheater, and she would never face her. Will also fight on the 25th anniversary card in Denver against Raquel Rocky Pennington, who's coming off of a bantamweight title defeat. Other news, local headlines all over the place, actually, not just local. Mark Coleman claims to be the victim of sexual abuse from an Ohio doctor. I assume he was while he was under anesthetic of some sort. It was some sort of sexual abuse. That's all we know so far. Moving on to happier news, hopefully. In Bellator, Aaron Pico, Mr. Hell of a lot of potential. I was going to say Mr. First time, not so much. Every time since, he's been spectacular. If you look at his resume with Bellator, Pico is going to be taking on Leandro Higo. It's added to the 206 Bellator card, which will also feature Rampage Silva Part 4 and Rory versus Gegard for the middleweight title, champ versus champ. Breaking news, Cody Garbrandt allegedly broke his hand at some point during the TJ rematch loss for the bantamweight title last Saturday. Seeing as the fight lasted all of 4 minutes and change, I think. Who knows where it happened. I assume it must have happened during one of the scrambles. I mean, that's not enough to really justify a rematch, or even if you take that as the L it was, because it was through and through an L. I mean, let's just take a second to talk about how amazing TJ looked and his ability after training with, why is his name escaping me, the boxing phenom, the lightweight boxing phenom, the ballet aficionado, what the hell's his name, Lobachenko. But the fact that he was able to hit Cody with Cody's most powerful weapon, Cody came out there with kicks after TJ showed that his kicks were the difference maker in the initial fight. Cody came out with a bunch of kicks, and TJ instead knew he'd be looking for the kicks, as he said in the post-fight interview. Just worked on his counter right hand. So every time Cody threw his right hand and loaded up on it, TJ threw his straight down the pike at an angle. Not like a straight, but you know what I mean, a hooking straight, if you will. So he had that natural force going to it from the ankle to the hip to the shoulder, as I've always taught people who want to learn how to throw that perfect type of right hand. Is the best way to explain it. That kinetic energy that flows through the body instead of loading up with your upper body like Cody does. So who knows where the broken hand happened? Probably in the scramble while he was trying to get to his feet, while TJ was trying to pound away to get the finish. Other news, Dana White claims GSP will return. He's saying outright will return at UFC 231 in Toronto, December 8th. But it will not be against the winner of Conor versus Khabib. How many times is that going to take me? Khabib, whatever. It'll more likely be against Anderson Silva, a decade too late, or somebody else of some notoriety. Dana said, I mean, the guy was a welterweight, couldn't hack it, and I'm paraphrasing, obviously. Then was a middleweight, vacated. It's just crazy. Pick a division is essentially what Dana's saying. So we've already mentioned this on a previous show, that the 231 in Toronto will be Jose Aldo's next stop once he has an opponent in his second to last fight before he hangs it up. So it's something to keep an eye on. Who will GSP face in December? This will be after we know who the winner is between Conor and Khabib, and as well as Poirier and Diaz. If that fight actually happens, it'll happen. But with Diaz, you never can tell if he's going to pull a diva-ish move to try to out-diva McGregor and pull out of the fight and get the headlines. He may even do it the day after the fight if Conor pulls it off against Khabib. But let's get back on track here. UFC has officially offered Stipe Miocic, the former champion who was knocked out by Daniel Cormier with the most perfect right hand you'll ever see, that could only be done by a light heavyweight, not a heavyweight who had a smaller frame, the way he snuck it in through the clinch and clipped him. Stipe's been offered a fight versus Curtis Blaydes, who I would say is probably your number 3, if not your number 4, if not your number 3 contender in the division, maybe a little higher. I have a hard time putting him ahead of Volkov. But that fight, if it were to happen, would be at UFC Denver as well, the anniversary show. But DC has been quoted, as we and you probably know, saying that if Lesnar pulls out, Stipe will be granted an immediate rematch as the substitute. Nico Montano will finally defend her UFC flyweight belt versus Valentina Shevchenko at UFC 228 on September 8th. Same card, obviously headlined by welterweight title fight. Champ Tyron Woodley will defend his belt after a year on the shelf versus Darren Till. And little side note, I mean, we've all heard about the whole Kobe issue, him being stripped, him not being stripped, him showing up at the White House with Donald Trump and Dana White, even though he wasn't photographed, with the belt. And Dana did his little his squiggle move there, what I call the McGregor trick, which is essentially saying, well, he won't be stripped until they touch gloves. So that's, and either way, we already know from his mouth, grain of salt because it's Dana, but Kobe allegedly will get the winner of the fight. So Till Woodley, whoever comes out on top, fingers crossed for Till, because it's more exciting just based on Woodley's track record as a champ. Sorry Woodley, I mean, you got so much potential and you're a Cardinals fan, so I can't go too hard for you. Go Cubs go. But anyhow, another fight on that 228 card that we're all sleeping on, I think we might have forgot about. Zabit versus Yair Rodriguez, people. That's one hell of a fight. Let's see how Zabit looks with 2 good hands this time around. That fucking kid was amazing. You don't understand how good that throw was unless you know throws or have a basic idea of MMA grappling. In the fight against kid's name's escaping me, Kyle, I want to say Bosniak. Anyway, moving on, UFC Fight Night, Glover Teixeira versus Jimmy Manuwa in Sao Paulo, Brazil on September 22nd. Coming up soon is a very surprising matchup featuring Little Nog, Minotauro Nogueira versus Sam Ali, Smiling Sam Alvey, who last I checked was a welterweight, but has beat a couple names as he's worked his way up the weight classes, going from welterweight to middleweight to light heavyweight now. He's beaten Gian Vellante, Rashad Evans, Nate Marquardt. So it's just, I never thought I'd see those two match up just based on the fact that one was a welterweight. But interesting fight that you should probably check out if you check out that card from Sao Paulo. Editorial note here. Speaking of light heavyweights, Anthony Smith, the guy who just KO'd Shogun Rua, will likely fight for a vacated light heavyweight belt once DC retires if he beats Ozdemir in their upcoming matchup, which he seems very capable of doing. I mean, he's been stopped before in various fashions, sub KO and all that, but I think he shouldn't have a problem with Ozdemir, especially after Ozdemir's hype was erased by DC and showed that he has a susceptible chin. Unofficial but nearly official, Luke Rockhold versus Chris Weidman 2. Electric Boogaloo almost booked for UFC 230 and MSG. That's a great fight to add to that. That's obviously not going to take the main event slot that I was telling you guys. I agree with Shab. Would be perfect for Jones versus Gus too. But moving on, November 17th, the UFC will hold their first show in Argentina. Women's super fight between Amanda Nunes, the women's bantamweight champ, and Christine Cyborg Justino, the women's featherweight champ, is targeted for the annual New Year's Eve card. This year it'll take place on December 29th. We'll see if that actually comes to fruition. I'm going to put a picture up on the video so you guys can see it, but Palhares Taquino looks juiced to the gills. He's on all the Mexican supplements, he's on all the TRT. The guy looks like a fucking tree stump, just like his nickname, more so than ever. He looks like he got stung by 20 angry bees, or 3 angry racists. You got to see the picture to believe me. Final 2 notes. Dana White basically is saying that he could take or leave Eddie Alvarez depending on what he wants to do. Finish career in the UFC, or leave and go to most likely Bellator, where they would probably take him in with open arms. But it's a subtle way of saying that we're not going to negotiate with you. It's another in the long line of fuck the fighters, we're in charge rhetoric that Dana loves so much. Or who knows, maybe it's pushed further on by that $4 billion debt and Ari Emanuel. But it's Dana. We've known Dana for years. This is his MO. Last piece of news, Darren Till made some statements about he doesn't give a shit about his wife or his daughter and all this shit. He cares about his legacy, and everyone's offended by it. And he said exactly what he should have said, which is people were too easily offended. He's in the zone. He's in training camp. He's got to do it for himself. I mean, Bas Rutten said it best. You can't fight for anyone but yourself, because then you'll feel like you let somebody down. It's a lot easier to let yourself down than to let down a village, so to speak. So he's got a great point there if you read between the lines, that it may be all bluster, and it may be just a good way of thinking of it. I mean, and who cares? It's not you. People, calm the fuck down. But either way, I mean, hopefully he gets the job done. He takes the camp seriously. I'm sure you guys all saw that video of him and Mike Perry meeting up on the street, and he thought Perry invited him to a spa, but he was saying spar. They had a nice little laugh about that, and then they started sparring. So now all over Twitter and such, everyone's talking about this is the greatest bromance ever. So hopefully we'll see it develop some more. Be a damn shame if Perry's game keeps stepping up and they ended up meeting one day, but hopefully not, because that'd be a great odd couple right there. A posh sounding Liverpool Brit and a Floridian, lack of a better term. The off chance you're listening, Perry, you know damn well that my partner in crime Muka loves you, so grain of salt. Anyhow, this has been Mike as always. This has been another episode of the Blue Corner. Stay tuned for the breaking news. One love. Keep on watching. Bye-bye.